Watch me as I fix the Star Wars sequels with AI. My name is Jason Hamilton. I have been teaching authors how to write and publish their book for years now. First as the content manager over at Kindlepreneur, which I did for 3 years, and now full-time on this channel. And the Star Wars sequels have gotten a bad rap. And I'll admit I'm a big Star Wars fan, and I'm actually not that critical of the Star Wars sequels compared to some other people I know. But they do have some flaws, and that has mostly to do, I think, with the ideas behind them. I was once talking to my brother-in-law, and the way he put it, I felt nailed it absolutely perfectly. Because if you look at the prequel Star Wars films, which also get a lot of criticism, George Lucas is a really good idea person, and I feel like the ideas behind the prequel trilogy were actually really good, but the actual execution in terms of the actual script and editing and all of the basically, the actual realization of George's vision lacked a little bit. But with the sequels, it appears to have been the opposite. The ideas were not really fully fleshed out or really understood. It wasn't really a priority, I feel, for Lucasfilm to understand what Star Wars is really about. But the execution of those limited, slightly flawed ideas that they had ended up being very good, which is why I'm not actually that critical of the sequel trilogy, because they did a lot of things way better than the prequel trilogy. I just feel like the ideas behind some of their decisions that they made might have used some improvement. And so in today's video, we're going to be taking some of those ideas, cobbling them together, and maybe using AI to help us make sense of them all in a way that will actually allow us to plot out a alternate 3-film synopsis on how we could actually do it better. So let's get into it. All right, so our first step is going to be diagnosing what the problems with the sequel trilogy were. Now, this is, of course, somewhat subjective. Everybody has their opinions, but because there is such a wide range of opinions out there, chances are the different AI models out there have a understanding of a wide range of views. And because of all of the stuff that they've been trained on, as well as accessibility to the web, they are probably going to have a good idea of being able to condense all of those arguments down into the biggest, most pervasive problems that people had with them. So we're going to start by going to 3 different AI chatbots and trying to ask the same question to all 3 to see what they come up with. The first one is going to be Perplexity, and I use Perplexity because it seems to be the best tool right now for searching the web. So if we want to basically look at what people are saying online, Perplexity is going to be the best one to search all of that data and give us a coherent answer from that data. So the question we're going to ask is, what are the most common criticisms and complaints about the Star Wars sequel trilogy? We're just going to ask this simple question, and I'm going to go ahead and enable Pro here so that we're getting the best possible answers. And here we go. While that's going, I'm going to go ahead and ask the exact same question in ChatGPT and in Claude Pro. Each of these kind of have their own strengths and weaknesses, and I want to make sure that we're getting a wide variety of possible answers to this question. And now I'm going to go through and actually field these questions and see which ones I think actually or are accurate and make sense. And if we were to fix those things, it would fix the overall direction of the story. Now, another thing that we're going to do is I'm going to prepare a document in a AI tool called Novel Crafter, which is my current favorite tool for creating basically any kind of long form written text, whether that's nonfiction or fiction. And we're going to be documenting a lot of these different problems inside of Novel Crafter so we can work with those problems later. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a custom category inside of Novel Crafter's codex system. We're going to say new. The category, we're going to give it associated tag of problem or problems. And we can give it a color too. We'll just do it red because red seems to be appropriate for anything that's, related to problems. And so with this, we're going to go ahead and close this. And now we can create a new entry. I'm just going to call it other. And we're going to name this problem 1. And before we actually enter in more information about this, we need to actually understand what is a problem. So let's go to our first answer here in Perplexity. We have the Star Wars sequel trilogy consisted of The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker, has faced significant criticism and complaints from fans and critics alike. Here are the most common criticisms and complaints. Number 1, lack of planning and cohesion. The trilogy lacked a unified vision and clear direction, leading to inconsistencies and contradictions between the films. The absence of a preconceived arc resulted in improvisation and retcons, which confused audiences and detracted from the overall overall narrative. This is 100% true. And I'd say this is actually the weakest point of the sequel trilogy as a whole. They set up a lot of things in the very first film, The Force Awakens, and then those things were not really satisfyingly paid off in future films. And I think they were trying to do this because that's kind of actually how the original trilogy started. But the original trilogy at least had George Lucas to sort of guide the vision. And even though he didn't know exactly where the next two films were going to go, he did sort of have a very good understanding of the ideas behind all three films. And so I think it kind of backfired in the case of the sequel trilogy. So this is 100% true. We're going to go ahead and copy this. We're going to go here into Novel Crafter and paste it here in the description. And just clean it up a little bit. And we'll finish naming this lack of planning. I'm going to also give this aliases of problem 1 and lack of planning so that we can access this particular information later. Let's also see if ChatGPT gave us similar information. Yeah, so lack of cohesive storytelling was its number 1 as well. I'm going to go ahead and copy this information into here so we just have a little bit more there. Let's see if Claude gave us the same thing. Yep, lack of cohesive planning. So all of these models seem to be drawing from the same sources or have basically been trained on the right data so that they understand that this was a major issue that people have. All right, I don't think there's anything else in Claude's answer that would add to what we have already. So now we have problem number 1, lack of planning, documented here. We can now go ahead to other problems. And as we go through these, I'm just going to document them here inside of Novel Crafter. So let's go ahead and create another one. Also, we're going to label this as problem, add that. And now this is going to be listed under that category that we set up with the color red. Because we already set that up there. So let's add a new entry and go through the next problem. So we have overemphasis on nostalgia. The trilogy relied too heavily on nostalgia, rehashing elements from the original trilogy instead of introducing new and innovative ideas. This led to a sense of predictability and a lack of originality in the storytelling. I agree with this, but only to a certain extent. I think nostalgia can be useful and done well. If you look at the 3rd season of Picard, that's the perfect case study of how to do nostalgia well. There's a lot of nostalgia in that season, but it was actually done in a way that served the story very well. And I think the problem with nostalgia in the sequel trilogy, particularly in the first film, The Force Awakens, is that the plot was actually very almost cookie cutter exact this as A New Hope. And I would only argue that nostalgia was really a major issue in The Force Awakens and a little bit in The Rise of Skywalker. But for the most part, The Last Jedi in particular, I think tried to be more original and ended up swinging too far the other way. And so a little bit of nostalgia is okay. So I am going to take this. We're going to name this problem 2 nostalgia. I'm going to label this as a problem. And I'm going to add just my own little caveat here. So I just added this caveat that this is only a problem when not well done. Nostalgia can add significance to a story, but only when done in such a way, et cetera, that it makes it better. Okay, poor character development. Rey's character in particular was criticized for lacking room to grow and development throughout the trilogy. The handling of her parentage and her connection to Palpatine were seen as unnecessarily and poorly executed. I'm not sure I agree with this. I think she could have started in a place that allowed for more growth, but they really tried with her character, and I think she did go through a decent arc. Her connection to Palpatine, I think, would have been fine had that been sort of part of the plan in the first place, but that clearly wasn't something that the filmmakers had in mind early on, which goes back to this first problem of lack of planning and cohesion. So I'm going to leave that one alone for a little bit. We have inconsistent pacing and tone. The film suffered from uneven pacing. I wouldn't say that's a huge issue. Okay, misuse of legacy characters. The treatment of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi was widely criticized for being out of character and inconsistent with his previous development. The return of Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker was seen as unnecessary and retroactively harmed in the original trilogy. Okay, so I've now added 2 more problems here. We've got problem Luke Skywalker, problem with Palpatine, and let's go on to this some more. We have lack of representation and diversity. While there were some issues with, for instance, Kelly Marie Tran's character, for the most part, I think Disney was trying their best here. And I think a lot of the criticism from the more toxic sides of the Star Wars fandom has actually been the opposite. They thought it was too diverse. So I'm going to just not include this one for now because I feel like Disney was trying, but being Disney, any big corporation, they're going to have some things that are just not going to be perfect. I'm just going to leave that alone for now. We have disconnection from the original trilogy. The sequel trilogy was seen as disconnected from the original trilogy, with some fans feeling like it did not respect the legacy of the original characters. I feel like we've covered that. Over reliance on fan service. Yeah, we kind of covered that as well. So we got everything here out of Perplexity. Let's see if ChatGPT gave us anything else. We have recycling old plots. The Force Awakens was criticized as being too similar to A New Hope. Yeah, I agree with that. But we've got a problem already listed for this. I'm just going to add this into the nostalgia bit. So it has just a little bit more info on that. The treatment of legacy characters like Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa, and Han Solo has been a significant point of contention. Many fans were disappointed in how these iconic characters were portrayed. Additionally, new characters Finn, Rey, and Poe received mixed reactions, with some fans feeling they were underdeveloped or not given satisfying arcs. So definitely for Finn, there was a lack of a satisfying arc. I think that Rey had one, but maybe could have been developed better. Same with Poe. They tried to give Poe an arc in The Last Jedi, but I feel like it kind of didn't stick the landing on that one. So definitely we want to include better arcs for all three. I don't know if this is something I would label as a full problem inside of Novelcrafter yet. Here's one that we definitely want to add. Handling of the villains. The portrayal of Supreme Leader Snoke and Kylo Ren received criticism, especially after Snoke's abrupt death in The Last Jedi without a clear backstory of significance. The return of Emperor Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker was also seen as controversial decision, with many feeling it undermined the conclusion of the original trilogy. Okay, I 100% agree with this. I already got something on Palpatine, but we're going to do a whole problem on just the villains of the sequel trilogy in general. So let's create another problem here. That we're now on problem 5, villains, and give it a label, give it an alias, problem 5, villains, and we'll paste this information here. Kylo Ren was not seen as scary due to acting like a whiny teenager. And we're more concerned about really entitled children, and I say children in the sense that they're acting like children, causing all kinds of issues. And I think that's what they were trying to go for here, but it kind of backfired, I think, because he ended up not being a very compelling villain. Same goes for Snoke. So we got information about Snoke. There wasn't really any backstory, any reason for us to believe that he is an interesting villain. Because if you don't give us something to kind of show that they are interesting and villainous, we're not going to really feel threatened by them. So there's that. So I added a bit here. Captain Phasma put up no resistance when she was confronted by Finn and others and told to lower the shields that would destroy the entire planet they were on, which makes her look like she's not actually a very good villain, which they sort of had a retcon for that they incorporated into some of the books and things, but that's the sort of thing that you really got to have it in the film. It's just not going to make her look like a good villain in the film. Cheapens the entire forces of the antagonist in general. And then I added the First Order had very little explanation or reason to make us genuinely fear them or think of them as capable villains. The only time that this really happened is that they did destroy a planet, but we also had no connection to that planet. There was really nothing about it that made us think, okay, these guys are anything more than just a bunch of whiny space Nazis, right? So I think this is actually one of the biggest flaws of the sequel trilogy as a whole. There really wasn't much to the villains at all. They weren't compelling enough to make us really empathize for the protagonists and the forces of good. Okay, so we've kind of covered some of these others. Last but not least, in ChatGPT, it said some fans and critics felt that the sequel trilogy was overly influenced by corporate interests. I agree with this, but I feel like there's no real way of getting around it because this is Disney that we're talking with after all, and Disney makes plenty of good films that have corporate interest, and so I don't really see this as something that would by itself cause the sequel trilogy to be a problem, because you can still absolutely make a terrific film and still have that corporate interest involved. Just look at the early Marvel films, a lot of the better Disney films that have come out over the last 5 years or so. You can still do it. So I'm not going to include that as a problem. Now let's look at Claude, see if it gave us anything new. So we have Rey's character development. Some critics argue that Rey was a Mary Sue, a character who is unrealistically skilled and lacks meaningful flaws. Yeah. So I think Mary Sue is a little bit harsh, but she did have a lot of skills, didn't have much of an arc or room to grow, and certainly lacked a lot of flaws, although they did give her a flaw of just basically not really trusting herself in the beginning. But that's kind of a thing that was really glossed over. And I will absolutely address the hypocrisy in calling her a Mary Sue, because in Star Wars, the original trilogy, Luke was very much the same way, and there isn't much of a flaw in Luke, much as there wasn't in Rey. They're very similar characters when you compare them objectively, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't do better and give her a good character arc, because, you know, that's how we do it. I'm going to add a lot of my own to it. So I added a thing here where it says she needed a clearer character arc to really create a satisfying finish to the story, and her arc was almost non-existent, especially because J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson clearly had very different ideas of where her character would go, so there's no cohesion across films. All right, I've added just one more, problem 7, development of other characters. That's because characters, especially characters like Finn, were clearly being built up as having an important arc, and then ended up just really being a minor side character by the end of the trilogy, and not really that important. And so I'm adding that, especially for him and Poe and Rose. Their characters were definitely hinted at having a larger thing, but then didn't. And some of that may have been in response to some of the trolls out there who didn't really like the characters, and Disney just being overly cautious, which I think was a mistake. I know I'm going to get lots of probably hate in the comments for some of these things that I'm talking about. Believe me, I actually do like these films overall. These are the problems that I think are genuine problems, and ones that we could actually fix if we're going to do so. So now it's time to find a solution that we're happy with for each of these 7 problems. So let's do that next. So for this next part, we're actually going to do this entirely in Novel Crafter, because we've brought in these 7 problems in to Novel Crafter. Here we can now work with these inside of Novel Crafter's way of, bringing in context and things like that. So we've got this general purpose GPT-4o chatbot here. We can change this. In fact, I am going to change it. We're going to change it to Claude 3.5 Sonnet, because that's my current favorite. But we might also want to try Gemini and some of these others, because those are often pretty good for brainstorming. So we have a couple of problems here. We have problem 1, lack of planning. And the solution to this one is obvious, right? We're going to actually plan out a 3-film arc and do it right here, right now. So I don't really need to brainstorm different ways to improve on this one, but it's good to have it here just so we can give it the context if needed. Let's also look at problem number 2, nostalgia. So again, I think nostalgia is one of those things that can be done well. And so we want to brainstorm ideas on how it could be done well. But again, I think this is an issue for everything overall. So I'm going to save this one until later to really address it, until we have more of a core idea of what these 3 films are going to actually be. And with that in mind, I think the best place to start is actually with problems 4 and 5, Palpatine and the villains, because if you can nail down what the conflict of the story is going to be, you'll have a better idea of what to do with the characters, what to do with the nostalgia, what to do with Luke Skywalker's arc, and all of that. Also, some of you may be wondering why I didn't say anything about Han Solo's arc or Princess Leia's arc, and I actually think that they were handled pretty well. Princess Leia obviously would have been nice to have more of her, but she tragically passed away before they could really do more development than they did, and that's not really an issue that we can have any control over. So we're just going to assume that they would have some way of getting Princess Leia into this, however we would create it. But I actually think that Han Solo's sacrifice at the end of The Force Awakens, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, was actually well done, and he serves as a really good mentor figure in that film, and so I'm happy to leave him as the mentor figure in that film. But let's go ahead and start with problems 4 and problems 5. I'm going to create a new entry here, and we're just going to call it, we're going to make this a global entry and say we're going to call it our task. Our objective is to create a better synopsis of the Star Wars sequel trilogy of films that addresses all of its problems and comes up with solutions to create a better story that doesn't include any of those problems. And I think that's good enough for now. We're just going to include that where needed. So we're going to say, consider our task and the problems outlined in problem 4 and problem 5. Okay. Brainstorm solutions for better villains in an alternate version of the Star Wars sequel trilogy. And because I've labeled it problem 4 and problem 5, it's automatically going to be pulling in the info that we already established in those two problems. And so we're going to go ahead and start with that. So we now have about 10 different alternate ideas here. So we have the rise of the Imperial Remnant. Instead of bringing back Palpatine to introduce a new threat, the Imperial Remnant, led by a charismatic and ruthless Grand Admiral inspired by Thrawn from Legends. This faction has been rebuilt in secret. The Grand Admiral is a brilliant tactician who studied both the Empire's and the Rebellion strategies, creating a formidable hybrid approach. You know, if it weren't for the fact that Star Wars is now bringing in Thrawn into other stories, I actually think this would have been a great way to introduce a kind of new and interesting villain, would be to have a brilliant tactician on the level of like someone with Sherlock Holmes level intellect, which is what Thrawn is. If you're unfamiliar with Thrawn, go watch Ahsoka. He's in that. He's one of my favorite characters in the Star Wars saga and was long before we saw him in live action. So I think this could be a good approach, but let's look at some of the other things, because I think we would need to combine this with something else that made it more interesting. Let's go look at some others. Supreme Leader Snoke, a force-sensitive AI. Reimagine Snoke as an advanced AI created by Imperial scientists before the fall of the Empire. The AI has gained sentience and force sensitivity, making it a unique and terrifying threat. Actually, the idea of like force sensitive droids, while maybe breaking the lore a little bit, is a very compelling idea to me, and one that could be very scary, especially because droids can be mass produced, right? So that could be very interesting. Kylo Ren, a tragic fall. Maintain Kylo Ren's internal conflict by making his fall to the dark side more gradual and believable. Show flashbacks. Okay, so yeah, we'll skip this one for now. The Knights of Ren. Develop the Knights of Ren as a significant threat, each with unique abilities and personalities. Make them former students of Luke's academy who fell with Ben Solo, adding emotional weight to their confrontation. Captain Phasma. Give Phasma a proper backstory and showcase her combat skills and strategic mind. Yeah, so I mean, some of these are good. They wouldn't necessarily make up the entire plot, but could just be a way of enriching that plot with something better. So having a Captain Phasma that was better handled than she was in the film would probably be helpful. Darkside cultists. Introduce a faction of Darkside worshippers who seek to resurrect Sith teachings. They could be manipulating events from the shadows, adding an element of mystery and occult threat. I like this too, especially if we have like a more tactical villain that's sort of the main villain of the saga. If we had this almost subplot of these Darkside cultists that are behaving in a dark side way, right? That could not only throw a wrench in what's going on with the protagonists, but also potentially with the villains as well, and just create an added layer of conflict that could be very interesting, depending on how you would do it. We have a corrupt New Republic figure that could be useful. We definitely didn't see much of the New Republic in these films, which I think was another issue that they had. Technological terrors. Instead of another Death Star-like weapon, introduce smaller but equally terrifying technologies, cloaking devices for capital ships, etc. Weaponized hyperspace tracking, mass-produced dark troopers or shadow droids, threat from beyond. Hint at an impending extragalactic threat similar to the Yuuzhan Vong from Legends that the First Order is prepared to face. This adds depth to the motivation and can set up future conflicts beyond the trilogy. Ooh, I like this too. Some kind of mysterious threat that maybe we only get hints of in the first film, and maybe show that our brilliant tactician, if we're going with that plot, is aware of, and we, as the trilogy goes along, we get a sense of that everything that the villain has been doing has been preparing for this greater threat. I think that's a fantastic way of doing this. So we're going to combine a couple of these things. We're going to go with number 1 and a version of number 2 here. We're going to also add an element of Darkside cultists and a threat from the beyond. And so I'm going to ask it to brainstorm various 3-episode arcs using those particular things, and see what it gives us, so that we can firmly establish who the villains of the trilogy are going to be. Well, let's combine idea number 1 with idea number 2. Make the charismatic Grand Admiral be actually Thrawn, not just based on Thrawn, and make the advanced AI some droids that are force sensitive. And in order to not break the lore too much, we're going to probably have to brainstorm how that could work practically and make sure it makes sense within the trilogy itself. But that might be beyond the scope of today's video. We just want to get a basic overall arching 3-episode arc, which makes them extra dangerous because droids can be mass produced. Also include elements of Idea 7, the dark side cultists, And idea 10, with the Grand Admiral being aware of this mysterious threat in film 1, and it becomes a bigger issue in films 2 and 3. Brainstorm 10 ideas for a 3-film narrative arc that involves these antagonists. So that was a little bit of a longer prompt there. We're going to go ahead and send that. Excellent combination of ideas. Let's brainstorm 10 ideas for a 3-film narrative arc involving Grand Admiral Thrawn, Force-sensitive droids, dark-side cultists, and a looming extragalactic threat. So we have film 1, The Awakened Threat. So it's giving me a bunch of ideas. So I think what we're going to want to do, it didn't quite follow my directions exactly, because I was asking for 10 ideas of trilogy arcs. Well, it gave me one idea for all 3 films and then a few other ideas of what to throw in there. So let's go ahead and break this down, and we're going to actually be creating some solutions. So we have all of our problems listed here. We're going to create another category. We're going to call this category solutions, and we're going to label them blue because this is Star Wars. So red, blue, solution. All right, so now we're going to create another entry and call it Solution 1, Villains and Conflict. So we're going to call this Solution 1 as an alias, give it that tag as a solution so it will turn blue. And we're going to pin this here for the moment while we fill up what this solution is for the villains and the conflict. So we want to make sure we establish what we want this film to be about. So I'm going to go ahead and select everything that it gave us here for film 1, 2, and 3 and paste it in here. But we're going to want to edit this. So we have film 1, film 2, film 3, and we want to make sure that this actually represents an arc that we're okay with, right? So we have the New Republic discovers Thrawn's Imperial remnant faction on the fringes of the galaxy. Thrawn reveals the existence of a Force-sensitive battle droid, shocking both the New Republic and the fledgling Jedi Order. I wouldn't say he reveals it. We'll say the protagonists discover the existence of Force-sensitive battle droids, shocking both the New Republic and the fledgling Jedi Order. We'll just say shocking everybody when they are used by Thrawn in an unprovoked and unexpected attack that no one understands why it happened. A group of dark side cultists emerge seeking ancient Sith artifacts to power their rituals. We'll say, meanwhile, a group of dark side cultists emerge seeking ancient Sith artifacts to power their rituals. They remain a mystery throughout much of this film, but clearly have a greater purpose. Thrawn hints at a greater threat beyond the galaxy that he's prepared to face. We'll just say there are hints at a greater threat beyond the galaxy that Thrawn knows about and is preparing to face, but we are not told what these are. Another thing that I didn't really label as a problem, but I do consider it to be a problem, is that the sequel trilogy did not really pay any sort of respect to anything that came before. Now, I'm not one of those people that says that Disney should have stuck to all of the lore that had been established by the books and comics and things, because there was a lot of stuff in there that it would have made creating a film that fit in very difficult. But it also felt like they just didn't care about any of that, which for big time Star Wars fans felt like a bit of a blow and really messed with one of the first rules of marketing, which is to appeal to your love group in order to get the, everybody that's indifferent about the product to love your product. You have to do it through the eyes of the love group. And the love group felt very affronted. They felt very betrayed by what they did by just basically disregarding everything. And so the reason I'm using Thrawn here and possibly the Yuuzhan Vong as well is because those were things that were established in the lore of the original books that I think would actually make good stories here. Now, we don't have to completely adhere to the Legends stuff that is no longer canon, but I think in much the same way that the Marvel Cinematic Universe often pays homage to important comic events and to basically the characters. You know, they're paying very close attention to what the characters are like and making sure they fit. I think it would have been important from the very beginning to have characters like Thrawn or the Yuuzhan Vong or any of those threats from this time period would have made a better story had they found ways to include them where it makes sense. And so that's why I'm including things like that in this version, because I think it would have actually made a better story and it would have made the fans much more engaged, which was a problem. So I think some people are probably going to disagree with me on that, but that's important to me, I think. All right, so that moves us on to film number 2, and we're just barely laying the groundwork for what the villains are going to be here, but we'll just look at this. Thrawn's forces gain ground using superior tactics and the Force-sensitive droids. Dark side cultists successfully activate an ancient Sith superweapon. Okay, interesting. Evidence of the extragalactic threat becomes clear, causing division in the New Republic, and I'm going to say this becomes a central point in the climax of this film, where this extra galactic threat is revealed to be the I'm not sure how to spell this, Yuuzhan Vong, I think is how that's spelled. Thrawn attempts to convince key systems to join him in preparation for the coming invasion. He also poses a serious threat to New Republic worlds, taking over some key strategic worlds / outposts. The end of this film looks very bleak, both because of the progress that Thrawn has made and the reveal of the Yuuzhan Vong. All right, and then we're moving on to film 3. We have the extragalactic threat arrives, forcing an uneasy alliance between Thrawn, the Republic, and the Jedi. The dark side cultists see the invaders as the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy and attempt to aid them. I like that. This happens unexpectedly and becomes a major setback for the protagonists. The Force-sensitive droids prove crucial in combating the technologically advanced invaders. A final battle determines the fate of the galaxy and sets up the future of the Star Wars universe. Okay, I think this is good. I feel like the Force-sensitive droids need a little bit more of something important. Let's see. Maybe in film 2, the Force-sensitive droids are, the protagonists achieve a false victory when they manage to destroy whatever is making the droids or making them Force sensitive. And we'll say this is a false victory because they discover at the end that these droids would have been instrumental in combating the Yuuzhan Vong, and they may have just destroyed their only hope. Okay? I think that makes for some good conflict. And this is all still very high level, and that's by design. We don't need to get into details yet. I haven't gotten into the protagonists at all. This is just the basics of the threats that they're going to be facing. But I think this is good for our entry on solution 1. So let's brainstorm some solutions to these other options here. Okay, so I've got another long prompt here. So we're going to say, keeping in mind solution 1, which is everything we just got for the villains, let's brainstorm some ways to incorporate Luke, Han, Leia, and other legacy characters in a way that avoids problems 3 and problems 2, which is about Luke Skywalker and nostalgia. We can keep elements from the sequel trilogy as it stands, with Luke being the focus of film 1 to try and find him to help, and with Han dying in film 1 as well. I think we can leave those elements. Luke and Leia should live to the end of the film trilogy, and Luke will be able to quietly retire at the end of film 3, knowing he has successfully trained the protagonist and the universe no longer needs him. I didn't really need to brainstorm that ending for him. I just felt that that would be a good place to end it, and because I don't think he needed to die. Then we can maybe add brainstorm ideas for character arcs for each, but only minor ones because they already had their arcs in the original trilogy. We'll say 20 ideas. Give me plenty of ideas here. Okay, I didn't really like the ideas that it gave me, but it was using GPT-4o, so we're going to try this again with with Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which we were using earlier. Okay, we got some good ideas here, but we're going to edit them a little bit. So we're going to create another entry here. We're going to call it Solution 2 Legacy Characters. And we'll just call it Solution 2. So let's start with Luke. And I'm actually going to write this out myself, consulting the AI on one side here. This is one of the great ways that AI can really help you, is to just act as a brainstorming guide, but still allowing you to do most of the actual work. It's just a way to get past writer's block. Okay, so I've gone ahead and written a lot more about these legacy characters, particularly about Luke. I wrote down a bunch of ideas on what his character arc could look like and his role in this particular version based on the suggestions the AI gave me. I did the same for Leia and Han, and I'm not going to get into these too much, but just understand that I've gone ahead and put all of that information here into Solution 2 on legacy characters. So now we're going to move on to the next bit, which is identify who the protagonists are going to be and what their main arcs over the course of the story is going to be. We're going to try and get 3 of them, and I don't really want to get more detailed than that because we're just still going for the overarching plot here. Now here's another reason why I might want to actually take a nod to the legend stuff, all of that lore that has been done before. Again, we're not going to do it exactly as it happens in Legends with all of the books and everything that came out in the 90s and the 2000s. All of that information is great. We are going to still assume that Disney would wipe all that slate clean if they were creating these films, but we're going to do so in a way that is a little bit more respectful of those characters. And so as a main addition to that, I think it would be important for these protagonists, or at least some of them, to be the children of Han and Leia and Luke even, that we got in the Legends canon. Maybe a little bit different than we saw in Legends canon, but we're going to bring them in and figure out what their arcs would be in this particular story. So my prompt here is going to be keeping in mind solutions 1 and 2. So everything that we've developed so far for the villains and for the legacy characters, let's brainstorm 3 main protagonists and the basics of what happens to them in this alternate version of the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Do it in a way that avoids the issues in problem 6 and 7, which is about Rey and the other characters. Let's make the main character Jaina Solo, who will have a similar role to Rey. We can also have Finn as a stormtrooper from Thrawn's forces who defects, because I liked that bit of the sequel trilogy. I thought that was a fresh and interesting take, so we're going to keep that. And Jaina Solo, for those who are not familiar, is a character from the old Legends content, which I think is appropriate to be as a main character here. So yeah, let's go ahead and see what this gives us. Okay, and I used GPT-4o this time, and it actually did a pretty good job. So we have background, daughter of Leia Organa and Han Solo. Jaina has been trained in both combat and diplomacy. She has an inherent connection to the Force, but struggles with the weight of her lineage and expectations. Her role, Jaina is the primary protagonist and takes on the mantle of the new Jedi leader. Her character arc in film 1, she starts off unsure of her abilities. By the end, and faces a setback when her father dies. By the end of the film, she begins to embrace her destiny. She builds confidence in film 2. Yada yada. Yep, this looks good. Jaina evolves into a true leader. She unites various factions against the Yuuzhan Vong. She shows growth by forming an uneasy alliance with Thrawn and learning to trust Finn and others. She faces internal conflicts about the dark side cultists and deals with their betrayal. Ultimately, she leads the charge in the final battle, confirming her role as the galaxy's new beacon of hope. So I think this is good. It's very broad, but I think we can actually go with this almost verbatim. I don't think we really need to change much about this. So I'm going to create a character here. Put all of that information here. We're going to just leave that as it is for now. So now she's listed here under characters. Okay, we got Finn's information here, a former stormtrooper from Thrawn's Imperial Remnant forces who defects after becoming disillusioned with their cruelty. And looking through this character arc, it's fine, but very generic and not that different from what we actually saw in the films. So this would need to be reworked a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and include everything we've got here as a new character. And this is something that we might need to flesh out a little bit more to give his ending a little bit more satisfying ending, but that may take some time to finally get right. So we're just going to call him Finn. And now we get protagonist number 3. So it gave us a random person, Kira Lorsanteca. I don't think this character works. We're going to say brainstorm 3. We'll say 10 ideas for another character to act as a as one of the big three. Because I'm not really happy with any of these. Tahiri, that's a Legends character. Ahsoka Tano. Would be interesting to have Ahsoka here, but I think she would probably be too old at this point. I mean, she could still be alive, but she wouldn't be acting in a main protagonist role for sure. Ben Skywalker, son of Luke Skywalker, grappling with living up to his father's legacy while striving to find his own identity. Combines Jedi training with tactical knowledge gained from his father. So I like the idea of Ben Skywalker being a character because he is a character in Legends, and I like Luke having a son. This could also be an opportunity to show Mara Jade in here because she's another major character to bring in. So I'm going to put in Ben Skywalker here, but we're going to make him not one of the big three. We're going to make him like a secret, kind of a wild card that we're going to include in all of this. So let's go ahead, add information about him here. When we first see him, we don't know who he is or what his lineage is, and he is part of the dark side cult. His arc has to do with why he was in that cult and his journey in eventually leaving it and reconciling with his father. So he's going to have an important role, but I wouldn't say he's the focus of this film. Maybe he could be a focus for like a future trilogy that came after this, in this hypothetical world where we're writing this story. So yeah, let's go ahead and put that down. And I put Ben Solo, I meant Ben Skywalker. And yes, I know that Jaina Solo has a twin brother, and we could find a way to fit him in, but I don't like the idea of having too many Solo/Skywalker characters here who are a main part. So we would probably want to find some way to disregard him from the main plot. Maybe he's captured and we don't see him much. Maybe he's even killed. That's assuming we're using him anyway. Like, we could just assume that maybe in this case Jaina is the only child. We could play around with the lore however we want. I like to pay homage to the lore, but not necessarily be forced to follow it exactly with everything that we're doing. So I actually think a good third character would actually be Poe Dameron that we had in the sequel trilogy, a character in a similar archetypal role that he plays, the sort of cocky pilot, the Han Solo type character. So I'm going to say generate an arc for Poe Dameron where his character is similar to the sequel trilogy as it stands, but adapted to fit with our new version of this story, including everything established in Solution 1 and Solution 2. Okay, so now we have a 3-film character arc plotted for him, and it's actually not bad. I really like the role that he plays in film 1. So I think that this is a great arc to have, and I'm just going to include it verbatim. We might change some details later, but this is good enough for now. So I'm just going to put this under a character name of Poe Dameron. And I was originally going to put this under Solution 3 main characters. I'm just going to remove this solution at this point, because we have them listed just as characters. All right, and now is the time to bring it all together, right? We've got lots of different information here, and we want to actually create just a 3-film synopsis that incorporates everything we've brainstormed so far, which is something that AI is really good at. So let's go ahead and do that and create our 3-film synopsis, and then maybe in a future video, we'll go deeper on what we can do per film. So this is the prompt that we're going to use now. There was a lot of criticism of the Star Wars sequel trilogy. We're going to brainstorm a different version of the trilogy that avoids, and then I list all of the problems here that we established. Instead, we want to use what we've brainstormed so far with Solution 1 and Solution 2 to form our synopsis. Also keep in mind that our characters, and I list all the characters here, with all of that information in mind, write a full synopsis for film 1. We're only going to do film 1 at this point. We'll do the other 2 in just a second. Film 1, The Awakening Threat, which is not really the title we want to go for, but we can leave it for now. The galaxy is in a state of uneasy peace. The New Republic, led by Leia Organa, has been working tirelessly to maintain order and unity among the star systems. However, whispers of a growing threat on the fringes of known space begin to circulate. We're introduced to our main protagonist, Jaina Solo, daughter of Han and Leia, skilled pilot and Force-sensitive individual struggling with the weight of her family legacy. Finn, a disillusioned stormtrooper with the mysterious Imperial Remnant faction. Poe Dameron, the New Republic's ace pilot and natural leader. Film opens with Poe leading a reconnaissance mission to investigate rumors of the Imperial activity. During this mission, they encounter an unexpected and brutal attack by Force-sensitive battle droids, shocking everyone. Poe barely escapes with crucial information. Meanwhile, Jaina is training on the new with the new Jedi Order, grappling with her abilities and the expected. So this is getting into a little bit too much detail for what I want right now. I really want just a full paragraph summary. So we're going to run this prompt one more time and tweak it just a little bit. Right. We'll just say, instead of a full synopsis for film 1, we're just going to say summary paragraph for film 1. Because I really want to start high level here. And what we were getting was not high level enough. So let's try this again. In the galaxy striving for peace, the New Republic faces the sudden emergence of Thrawn's Imperial remnant on the galactic fringes. Thrawn's superior tactics and the use of mysterious Force-sensitive battle droids catch everyone off guard in a shocking, unprovoked attack. Amidst this turmoil, former stormtroopers Finn defects, providing vital intelligence that aids the New Republic's understanding of their new foe. Jaina Solo, daughter of Han and Leia, and the ace pilot Poe Dameron lead a daring mission to locate the elusive Luke Skywalker, who has gone into hiding to seek answers to an ancient prophecy. Alongside a shadowy group of dark side cultists begin their search for Sith artifacts to power dark rituals, hinting at a looming greater threat. Han Solo makes a poignant sacrifice during a critical mission, propelling Jaina, Poe, and Finn into the roles of central heroes. The film ends with the revelation of Luke Skywalker poised to pass on vital knowledge about an impending unknown menace that Thrawn might be prepared for. So this is more or less what we've got so far. Now it's a little bit jumbled. Okay, so we want to make a little bit better sense of it, but for now, this will do. I'm going to go ahead and create a global entry here. We're going to call this Film 1 Synopsis. Paste this in here, and I'm going to make a few little tweaks. Okay, so I've added a few things here about this first synopsis. We get to introduce to the character Ben Skywalker, who's part of the Dark Side cult, but we don't know he's Luke's son yet. The Dark Side cult will remain largely unrelated to the rest of the story, but Ben will have his own arc within it, and there will be hints of connection to the larger threat. So it'll be just a little bit of a subplot that we'll sprinkle in there to make it interesting. And then I also added this bit about the climax of the story is a moment when Leia and the protagonists are able to convince the New Republic to come together just in time to stop Thrawn from making a huge victory. But we learn that this may have been an issue because we learn that Thrawn is aware of some kind of greater threat that he is preparing for. The film ends with the discovery of Luke Skywalker, and we are left wondering why he has been gone all of this time. So yeah, that's what we've got so far for film 1. All right, so our next prompt is going to be basically telling it what we modified. I've modified your results as follows. Then I'll input my version of the synopsis, and then we'll say, with that in mind, give me a synopsis for film 2. So here we go. As Thrawn's forces press their advantage, utilizing superior tactics and Force-sensitive droids, the New Republic struggles to mount a defense. The shadowy dark side cultists succeed in activating an ancient Sith superweapon, causing wide-scale devastation and chaos. Jaina Solo continues her Jedi training. Meanwhile, Finn grapples with his past as he provides crucial intelligence to fight Thrawn. Poe Dameron's leadership is tested as he faces a significant tactical blunder due to his impulsive nature. Ben Skywalker's journey within the dark side cult intensifies as he starts to question their motives and his own place within the organization. The connection between the cult and the greater threat becomes more apparent, hinting at the extragalactic menace Thrawn was preparing for. The protagonists achieve a bittersweet victory when they destroy the creation method of the Force-sensitive droids, only to later realize these droids would have been critical in combating the newly revealed threat, the Yuuzhan Vong. This revelation leaves the New Republic in deep peril as Thrawn appears more justified in his harsh methods of preparation, and the galaxy stands on the brink of a new unprecedented invasion. As the film ends, the New Republic is divided, with some systems considering an alliance with Thrawn to face the Yuuzhan Vong. Thrawn's forces gain ground, escalating the sense of urgency, and the stage is set for a final confrontation with both the internal and external enemies poised to strike. This is perfect. I wouldn't change hardly any of this. It's still a little disjointed and not specific enough in some cases, but we're really just looking for the high level basics of what's going to happen in this film, and we can flesh it out later. So I'm going to go ahead and create another global entry here, film 2 synopsis, and just paste that in. I'm not going to change anything about it for now. And then we're going to say, great, now do the same for film 3. All right, and I'm pretty fine with this summary as well. So we've got, with the arrival of the extragalactic threat known as the Yuuzhan Vong, the galaxy is thrown into chaos. Thrawn's Imperial Remnant, the New Republic, and the Jedi are forced into an uneasy alliance to combat the overwhelming invaders. Jaina Solo steps fully into her role as a leader, uniting disparate factions and forming a coalition to defend the galaxy. Finn utilizing his insider knowledge to help orchestrate strategic defenses, while Poe Dameron leads daring space battles to counter the Yuuzhan Vong's advanced technology. Meanwhile, Ben Skywalker's internal struggle reaches its peak as he decides to leave the dark side cult, discovering his true heritage as Luke Skywalker's son. His defection becomes a crucial turning point in the battle against both the cultists and the Yuuzhan Vong. The cultists, seeing the invaders as the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy, attempt to aid the Yuuzhan Vong, causing a major setback for the protagonist. The Force-sensitive droids, initially thought to be destroyed, are revealed to hold the key to countering the Yuuzhan Vong's formidable technology. Jaina, Finn, Poe, and Ben lead a final all-out assault against the combined forces of the cultists and the Yuuzhan Vong, culminating in a climactic battle that determines the fate of the galaxy. And again, this is broad, but we're only looking for the basic pieces here. I might be a little bit hesitant with the Force-sensitive droids. They might serve a bigger purpose than this, but I think the whole implications of Force-sensitive droids is a big deal. So we might want to work with that a little bit more. In the end, the heroes emerge victorious, but not without significant sacrifices. Luke Skywalker decides to retire to Tatooine, etc., etc., etc. So I think we have all of the major points here that are I'm pretty happy with all of these. The main thing is the conflict, and we've done a good job of establishing what the main conflict is going to be. It fits a good 3-act structure where things get progressively worse with the first 2 films, and then it's looking pretty bleak in the third one, and they just kind of pull together a last minute fix for everything. I think that's a really great idea, and overall I think this is a beginning of a really good story, and one that would definitely be a better, well-planned outline. So thank you for being here to watch me brainstorm all of these ideas, and let me know your thoughts in the comments on whether you think these ideas are good, or if there would be a better way to do them, what you would do, because I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that we could do all of this, but just let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.